Okay, Tom, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, will do. So, good evening, everybody. My name's Tom, and welcome to the second of these sessions that we're holding every month for the duration of 2024. We're going to just call it Chats with Cricket Coach 365, but mainly tonight it's going to be listening to Russell and to Karen, whom I'd like to extend a massive vote of thanks to for giving their time this evening and all the work they've done to pull together their talk around a subject which I think for anybody involved in club cricket will be very, very valuable and very, very important. So I know that they've got a bit of a script, to say the least, but we may go off into different directions of travel. As far as questions are concerned, please keep them to the end. And then, I'm sure between us, we'd be happy to kind of answer any questions that anyone's got. We will, well, as you know, we are recording this on Zoom, and we'll make it available for everyone who can't make it this evening. But thank you for attending, and welcome to the talk. And over to you, Russell and Karen.
Grand, thank you very much, Tom. Tonight we're going to do a presentation based around Corbridge Cricket Club and the devastation caused to the club by Storm Desmond in 2015. At the time, I was chairman of Northumberland Cricket Board, but my professional role was as a claims inspector for an insurance company, having dealt with many flood claims. So my involvement with Corbridge started when the flood occurred, and I was asked to go along and see if I could help in the immediate aftermath and give them some advice regarding the recovery programme. I'm also an ECB tutor, which is of relevance when you consider some of the discussions we're having about coaching tonight. I first met Karen around the time of the flood, who was a committee member and a long-standing volunteer of the club, and whose daughter was a teenager at the club, and whose journey I have followed over the last few years as she grew through the junior programme into bigger and better things in terms of her playing, but also the pair of them became level 2 cricket coaches and have in turn helped youngsters within the club as the club has evolved. Just to give you a bit of context to the club, it was a small village club on the banks of the River Tyne, or actually in the River Tyne in 2015. It was set up in 1886 and moved to the current ground in 1901. The play in what is effectively Division 5 of the pyramid system in the northeast, albeit being promoted this year to Division 4. They didn't have a long history of junior cricket, and indeed in the 1990s they had 2 senior teams and 1 multi-age group team, which was the under-18s. They also shared a team with a nearby club called Riding Mill, which kind of distorts the figures about how many adults they had back in 2015. The relevance of that we'll mention later. They started a girls' team around 2008, and Karen was one of the driving forces amongst the mothers, with Katie, her daughter, and a number of other very talented youngsters who would be about 8, 9, 10 at the time. At the time, they had 77 members, including women, but that was inflated by having a joint team with a nearby club. They had an old wooden bar and social area, which I'll show you now as we move on to the first screen. December 5th, 2015, a day which I think will be etched in the memories of everybody connected with the club. Storm Desmond primarily caused problems in North Lancashire and Cumbria, but the River Tyne burst its banks a bit further up and basically flooded the club, not for the first time in its history, but certainly one of the worst incidents they've ever had. This is after the flood waters had actually gone down a bit. And if you have a look at the middle building with the 2 white turrets, you'll see the water level and how much it had dropped by that stage by the watermark and the brown staining just below the windows. So that'll give you some idea how deep it was. I was asked to go along 2 days later to say, right, can you give the club some advice in terms of the insurance position here? And turned up basically to see this carnage. Inside of the water, as you see, got above the level of the chairs. All of the furniture has been soaked and covered in silt. See the tidal mark above the seating. Kitchen, refrigerators have been thrown around. On electric light smoked. Pub had plugs which were mounted halfway up the wall. Again, a useful for defence, but unfortunately it's been overwhelmed by the extent of the flooding. The flood mark above the actual flood area. So that was the scene that greeted us on the morning. I don't have photographs of what the outfield looked like, but effectively it was if the entire ground had been pebble dashed. All of the cobblestones had been washed out the river and out the car park and were all over the outfield, caked in mud. And there was a big yellow container 10 foot up a tree at the far end of the ground, bits of old trees lying on the outfield and that kind of thing. And I'd gone along with the England Wales Cricket Board pitch advisor for the area, a guy called Paul Jackson. And one of the first things that he said is, we've got to get these stones off the outfield, because if they basically get compacted into the ground, you'll be wrecking your cutters for the next 20 years. So the first bit of it was around trying to get a massive volunteer force together to basically pick up all the stones and all the debris off the outfield before it sunk into the mud and became a basically long-term hazard. Now, I turned up at the ground, as I say, I think it was the 8th of December. Just at the time, a BBC journalist by the name of Dawn Thewlis was there. Dawn's father I played county cricket with at Northumberland, and he or she basically recognised me and came over and asked what was going on. Gave an explanation. She said, would you do a piece to camera? So we did a piece for the Look North programme that evening, which went out that evening and the following morning. We notified the ECB of the flood and the fact that this publicity was going to be on the television. And unbeknown to us, the following morning, the ECB had a meeting with Sport England around the flood recovery in North Lancashire and Cumbria. We ended up on a list with Sport England for emergency funding. We were very quickly joined by a guy called Dan Musson from the ECB, from the facilities team there. Now, Dan was fantastic. Within a couple of days, he arranged for about £10,000 worth of funding and said, look, it's going to impact upon your immediate income and your ability to generate income. And that sort of help basically kept the club afloat. He also gave a lot of advice in terms of what we needed to do long term, because it was an existential threat to the club, and seeing the impact upon a very well-meaning group of volunteers who had seen their club absolutely devastated. It was as much about how we motivated those volunteers to say, this isn't the end, this is actually a new beginning for you. So that initial technical advice and financial input from ECB was very helpful. We then had a young girl called Jenny Wilkes who created a song based on the Monty Python Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, and changed the wording on it to mirror the Tyne overflowing and the threat to the cricket club, which went viral. And we piggybacked some fundraising on the back of that viral video that she did. And eventually we got over £41,000 in donations. from people who, had little or no connection with the club. And again, that was a great fill-up and a bit of a morale boost to everybody concerned. So having set about the clean-up, it was all right, what's the fight back here? We're in this situation. Do we try and fix this old wooden hut and all the contents of it which were wrecked? Or do we actually use the opportunity to say, right, let's scrap this, use the insurance money and try and build something new? So the fundraising then began, and we were quite fortunate in that one of the lads I used to coach as a youngster agreed to come along and again give a bit of a fill up and a bit of a morale booster. You might recognise this chappie, and he came along and hosted a presentation evening for the club. And again, it was around getting lots of members energized. We're going to try and fundraise. We're going to try and do some stuff to rebuild this club. ECB again were very helpful and pointed other characters in our direction. And Katie will recognise, who's on this call, will recognise herself in there. And Ben Stokes, the current England captain, came along and gave us a presentation from Waitrose Community Matters. And this was all part of an ongoing fundraising activity. So whilst this fundraising was going on, it was also, what are we fundraising for? Do we rebuild a wooden hut? Or do we make something that future-proofs the club's future? And one of the things we decided to do is look to make the whole premises more sustainable. Sustainable in terms of its flood impact, sustainable in terms of its environmental impact, which we'll come back to later. That's the resulting replacement for the wooden hut, that grand-looking building, which is actually on stilts. So if we flood again, it's above the level that any previous flood, and there's been numerous since 1700, it's above that water level. Now, we're hoping this will never be needed because Northumbria Water have done some significant work building up the flood bank, but that state-of-the-art, environmentally sensitive building benefits from a whole host of built-in features around insulation, around the thermal doors on it. We've done things like put solar panels on the main building where we get change, which you can see on the left. You can't quite see the solar panels there. We've put a groundwater harvesting system in. We've looked at things like aerated electrical equipment in the bars, timers on everything, car chargers for electricity cars, renew the gas supply. The building on the left, which is the changing accommodation, we stripped off all of the plasterboard there, because when a property gets flooded, the biggest problem is the water gets into the plasterboard and seeps up the wall. And it goes probably about 18 inches, 2 foot above the level of the water. It just seeps up. So you have to take all the plasterboard off and then wait for it to dry out. So when you have a flood claim in a house, you're out of the house for about a year because you have to hack all the plasterboard off and wait for it to dry out. So now we only have breeze block walls in the changing accommodation, but the whole thing is far more sustainable long term. And as I hope you'll appreciate, it's a much bigger and better pavilion than it was. The sources of grant aid that we got, we can go into in detail if people want, but everything from the local wind farm, the ECB, various county council grants, the Rotary Club, the Lions, the Community Foundation, various crowdfunding activities, trusts, donations, all basically went to fund what turned out to be a £375,000 rebuild, which includes the insurance money we got off the old pavilion. So that took about 2 years to come to fruition. And there was all kinds of sort of panics where we suddenly found if you put it on stilts, it was going to cost about another £100,000. And all of a sudden we're thinking, oh, we've done all this fundraising, it ain't going to work. Unfortunately, the ECB were very supportive in that and helped us over that particular hurdle. Now, I came into the club, as I say, with the cricket board hat on. And one of the first things that we said is the marketing of things like the girls and the women's team. And yes, you've got a junior team, but you need to extend the offer to make this a much bigger community facility. So the first thing we actually did was run 2 coach support worker courses in a local middle school gymnasium or sports hall or whatever you want to call it. We invited people from other clubs to come along because if I was putting it on, it was probably worthwhile getting people from other clubs, and also helped pay back the other clubs for all the help and support that their volunteers had done in terms of picking up the stones and the donations made to the club. So that was looking at putting together a workforce that was going to support our All-Stars. Now, All-Stars was coming in effectively a year later, so we had a good lead-in time of about a year to put all the plans together to make this work. Apart from the 2 coach support worker courses, there was a lot of planning about how are we going to organise ourselves to maximise the benefits of having lots of youngsters. And we were planning on 20 or 30 youngsters coming along from 5 to 8-year-old because nobody done it before. So we were sort of thinking, if we plan for that, we've got a workforce that can deal with it. And we put a few of the youngsters on activator training. Some people did it for the Duke of Edinburgh Award and that kind of thing. But I'll stop there around that initial planning phase and how we were putting a workforce together, because I think this is where Karen's journey as a coach come in. So if you wouldn't mind, Karen, can you just give us an overview of how you first took those baby steps into coaching through that coach support worker course?
Yeah, well, I first started helping with the coaching when my daughter was only 6, so that's 14 years ago. So I did the support workers course a couple of years later, really to help me develop my coaching skills. My daughter and I both got involved in the All-Stars program when it started, and we were really keen to try and inspire the future generation of girls. So that was one of our main motives for doing it. And then I decided to do the level 2 course so I could run the girls' sessions on my own, which was great with regard to helping me structure my coaching sessions in a more logical fashion. And more importantly, I think the biggest insight I got was to be brilliant at the basics. So I learned the basics of kind of teaching these young people. So the importance of the grip, the stance, backing up when fielding, the delivery stride and foot placement when bowling. So that was the level 1. The level 2 was a great grounding to help me develop my coaching.
Okay, now that basically gave us relative confidence to say we have a number of sensible adults here with a qualification, so we tick the club mark boxes. Let's try All-Stars. So anticipating 25, 30 people, you can imagine we were a bit taken aback when 92 arrived. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to coach 92 5 to 8-year-olds. It takes some real planning. And one of the things, apart from obviously getting the staffing, is you've got a really good resource in the iCoach program, in the iCoach Cricket website and app. That enabled us to identify exactly what we were doing every week and scale up each of the stations to accommodate. So we had like a mass warm-up, which might be something like heads and tails. So we had the best part of 50 cones set out with a ball and 2 white lines, and we're playing heads and tails. You have a batting station, a bowling station, a fielding station, and then various games. So this entire ground was filled with cones and flags and pop-ups. And as you'll see in the picture here, all the little bubble pop-up things are really creating a nice arena for the children to play in, as well as making it very easy for us to segment which of the activities was where. So you'll see on the photograph, there's lots of children wearing different bibs. The first week, kids basically would mingle, and you would say, right, red group, under or year 1, you're on the fielding drill. And then after your 15 minutes, you go on to the bowling. Well, they all ran away, had a drink, and went back to different stations. So the first thing we did is got bibs. So it made it really easy to herd them, because that's what it was like. It was like herding 92 children who just wanted to run and laugh and clap and all this kind of thing. So that made the organisation a lot easier. And we were also fairly successful in recruiting some of our older juniors, particularly the girls and people on Duke of Edinburgh type qualifications or awards, to actually supplement the volunteer workforce that we had of the club coaches. We had several activators trained. So again, they were sort of young cricketers like Katie and Kira Bowden and 1 or 2 others who went on activator training, which helped manage that massive group. One of the other unforeseen benefits of using iCoach was we had a few parents who had children with special educational needs who, rang me up and said, look, don't want to send my child along for 8 weeks and pay 40 quid or what have you, because I don't know if they're going to like it and be able to cope with, being part of a mass group. So what we did is send the video links from iCoach and the cards and said, look, sit down with your child, go through it at home and say, this is how the game's played. Here's the card so you can understand how it works. If you want to come along to the club for that first week, you help as an activator. You just go around with your child, so you're there in case of anything kicking off, and you will support the other activators and the coaches make that activity work. Now, the feedback we got, we also sent a photograph of whichever activator was going to be allocated to go around with that particular age group, so that the child coming into a foreign environment felt more familiar, because they knew the face and they were introduced to that activator who knew the background to that particular individual. Needless to say, the children and the parents stayed. So that was an unexpected benefit of using some of the technology ECB aligned to the All-Stars programme, and it enabled us to cater for people who maybe wouldn't have stayed involved in our sport or any other sport. So as you see, we've got hodds and hodds of kids, went really well. I'll talk about the impact of having so many children and so many adults in a financial way a little bit later, because I want to stick to the coaching at this stage. So in terms of recruiting the coaches, they came through their coach support worker. Some of them did activator training. Katie, Karen, and a few others went on to do their level 1s and their level 2s. So they became formally qualified coaches. And working alongside previously qualified coaches enabled them to develop the skills, the confidence to say, I can do this. And they provided a real leadership towards all those youngsters on their very first baby steps into our game. Now, the motivation of the young volunteers varied. Some were Duke of Edinburgh, some were just see buildings, some genuinely want to get involved as potential teachers or coaches as a future career. And when I'm looking back, we actually see some of those 12, 13, 14-year-olds from that time are now coaches, are now working in cricket professionally, are now playing professional cricket, or high performance cricket. So from those very early days, we've seen some really positive outcomes. In terms of upskilling the workforce, I'll say we did the level 1s, did the level 2s. We also went along to do some internal CPD. Now, as Karen has alluded to, when she did the level 1 and level 2, there were lots of things that help getting involved and motivating children and making sure the environment is safe. There's not masses amount of technical cricket content now. And that's a two-edged sword. It means it's much easier for volunteers with not necessarily a lot of cricket experience to provide the leadership we need to at that age group. But equally, if you want to go on and develop your own coaching and help older children, that little bit of CPD the club do certainly helps. Now, that's our first group of volunteers. And I can just see one or two sort of on this call cringing at, God, is that what it was like those years ago? And that's our first year of volunteers. Some of them had played cricket, some of them were footballers, one of them organises pop concerts and has never done any cricket. So I had a really mixed bunch. But the commitment they showed to making it all work and the adaptability to trying to make this completely new concept fun for the children was fantastic. Now, as a club, I think one of the most important things we've done is invest in our coaching team, whether that be paying for the level 1s and the level 2s or organising internal CPD. What we've also done is brought in coach educators. I've been a coach educator for over 30 years. We've brought in Tony Robson, who is the ECB, one of the ECB training managers, coach education, to work with the club, with the emphasis being on, right, you've passed your driving test. We're now giving you a pile of kids. We're going to help you with the planning process. We're going to help you with delivery. We're going to give you feedback. Let's see how we can improve the quality of what we're doing to those youngsters, which will in turn improve them and improves the club's long-term development. Part of that was also around the recognition of all of our coaches. So apart from internal things like giving them tracksuits, nominating from various awards, it was all about rewarding and recognizing. The CPD took another step where we started running indoor activities based upon some of the stuff the ECB used to do in level 2 and level 3, but is no longer taught. And that hopefully has enabled the coaches to understand how you break down a skill. So you see a youngster making a mistake, and because you've understood how that skill is broken down and developed, you can then spot it and put it right. So again, I'll come back to Karen at this point, because Karen, having done our initial our initial coach support worker course, did our level 2 and has been through effectively all of this internal CPD and the support that she receives on club night from Tony, myself and others who are there as coach educators. So over to you, Karen.
I think you said most of it, mate. So obviously Russell ran some CPD sessions for us, which was kind of, you know, as he said, breaking down the skills, which I found really, really useful, because I think sometimes you go into it, you do this course, and then you're like, oh, I know what I'm talking about, but I don't quite know how to present it. So those, I mean, we did the last few, we did, you know, just quite recently in the last kind of month, 6 weeks, and they really kind of were good for increasing skills and confidence, and obviously built upon the ECB courses. I personally found them really invaluable, and they were a good confidence boost for me. And also, as Russell mentioned, we had Tony Robson, who's there to coach the coaches and to support us on a Friday night, which again has been great. And he's been helping and guiding us to be the best that we can. So that's we are very lucky as coaches. Obviously, we are all volunteers, but we have a good support network, which makes us perhaps stick around, because if we didn't have that, it might be kind of easier to call it a day. As your kid, you know, as your child progresses, you know, there has to be a reason to keep getting involved.
And I think that's one of the lessons I would flag up, because having been involved in club cricket for more years than I care to remember, one of the constant themes is how you constantly review all of the coaches within a club, because you quite often get a parent will go through with their child. The thing that sets Karen and people like Karen apart is that children go onwards and upwards, yet Karen continues to devote a huge amount of personal time, effort, emotion, everything that goes with being a club coach, way beyond our child's own involvement. And, you know, I take my hat off to her for that. Now, going on, so we've done the CPD. Let's see. I talked about the rewards side of this. I could have put about 20 slides up here, because so many of our coaches have received awards. I spoke earlier about Jenny Wilkes, who did the Always Look on the Bright Side of Life thing. She's also done All-Star. She did her activator training. She did help with the fundraising. She drove the tractor when they were cleaning the Clarty bits of stone off the outfield. The first couple of years was absolute gem when it came to sort of helping the club recovery. And she was only at the time a student herself, so it was a significant personal commitment. The presentation was done at, I don't know if you recognise Steve Harper, the Newcastle goalkeeper, with his Oddballs charity shirt on, which is not my sartorial taste, but we'll leave that as it is. So we've talked about the breakdown of the process we went through. Did it work? And I'd invite you just to have a look through those figures. Effectively, the yellow is December 15, when the flood occurred. The following year, they didn't have a bar. So effectively, the income has gone down because they couldn't sell any beer. The bar takings were down, the subs were down, the facility hire was through the floor. And then All Stars kicks in December 17. And you look at the evolution of the income of the club over the preceding years. And the second yellow bar is the 2 COVID years. So effectively, you've taken the club's income from, you know, between £8,000 and £11,000 up to last year's figure of nearly 57,000. So when I entitled this talk about the benefits of coaching in terms of club development, if you're one of these people who is only motivated by increasing money for your club, I think I can pretty hand on heart say, tick, big tick. The second line is even more interesting, because when All Stars started, there was a huge pushback from many clubs, because of the £40 the children were charged, and for that they got bats, backpacks, shirts, a whole host of other goodies, and 8 weeks coaching, the club only got a fiver of that £40, albeit they got a lot of coaching kit and all those pop-up banners. Now, it's how you, the value to the game is how do you commercially gain from that investment of lots of youngsters. And as you'll see, from 2017 onwards, with the exception of the COVID years, there's been a significant increase year on year in the bar income. Now, that in itself is linked to this now became the place to be on a Friday night in Corbridge. The whole village turned up. As a club, we learned to commercially exploit that in terms of staffing the bar, in terms of we have an ice cream provision now. We sell tea and coffee. Initially, we sold a lot of food, but again, that was a drain on the available resources, and we stretched ourselves too far. So what we did at that point is we invited catering vans in. So they provided the food via the catering van. It released the volunteers to help on the bar, to help with the activities on the field themselves, and generally just released the pressure that those first couple of years we were under and placed ourselves under to try and deal with the demand that we'd generated. The catering vans place a percentage of whatever their takings are. So we effectively allow them to park on the outfield. They feed the hundreds of people who turn up to watch their kids and buy our beer. So that bar income is a reflection of the fact that that's now the social place to be. On the sub side, again, bit of an anomaly. It's remained relatively flat at a time when we've added over 100 members to what we had in the first place. The reason behind that is we only get a £5 for all of these juniors. So in terms of the revenue directly to the club from the junior membership, doesn't make, it's relatively neutral. The money and the value to the club is by commercially exploiting that through the bar income and the food sales. Second, the final column, which is less significant, but it'll show you how we've generally increased the facility hire. So we've got things like a book club meet there, a knitting club, a yoga club. So there's a lot of other community activities take place in our pavilion, which again makes us the centre of the community. So we talked about, did it work? So hopefully I've demonstrated it worked financially. We've had a significant increase in membership. The grant aid, as of last week, stood at, we've received £439,000 in grants since December 2015. So that's come from not just the ECB, there's a whole host of trusts and council activity, foundations, the Rotary Club, the Lions, a whole host of people who've donated to the club. But as we've looked to make the club sustainable, getting more effective fridges and cooler systems for the bar has been helped by grant aid. And the club last year was awarded the Cricketer magazine UK's greenest cricket ground, and we won a similar ECB award. There's a whole host of other awards about Club of the Year, Volunteer Individuals of the Year, and things like that I could have put up there. But again, what it's done for the club in terms of external recognition and accreditation has been phenomenal. And again, I would suggest actually that's a direct result of the community coaching program we put in place that's allowed all these other things to happen. The club's senior men's team is now the highest it's been in its history. They got promoted last year. So that, it's onwards and upwards. And some of those original all-stars are now starting to penetrate into senior cricket now for the first time. And our next step is to try and make sure they get the appropriate coaching to go above and beyond. We've increased the number of qualified coaches from 5 to 11 with additional activators for all stars. The number of volunteers has been a bit of a challenge to track because there's no consistent system. So we've tried to do a like-for-like increase. We've increased the number of volunteers from 30 to 43. And those are regular volunteers doing set activities. But that grossly underestimates the impact of all kinds of other community events that we run with community partners. As I keep coming back to, the club is now the heart of our community. We host the Charlotte Straker charity fundraising events. We have a kites team we've actually got 3 teams on a little kites pitch at the side of the pavilion. Their season overlaps to a degree, but provides significant bar income. If you're ever having to choose between running something like croquet on the outfield to kites, kites drink more beer. We'll have apple pressing. So one of the club's sponsors, Hadrian Border Brewery, they bring their apple pressing stuff, and the whole village brings its apples down. We crush them, we'll make them into apple juice and cider and sell it for ourselves and 2 other charities. We have a big charity day where there's marquees on the outfield. And again, it's not just about Corbridge Cricket Club, it's about some of the associated charities we work with. We run holiday camps where the host for school festivals. We'll have local football club presentations in the pavilion. And we have a lot of county junior and over 60s fixtures on the club, on the club's premises. Now, let's just look at the increase in membership. So in terms of junior boys, massive increase. Junior girls, significant increase. Adult men's a bit of an anomaly because that 60, if you remember at the start of the talk, included a lot of people who were members of another club that played under our name for league purposes. So that's not a strict comparison. The number of adult women has remained largely static, but we did lose quite a few who went onwards and upwards into representative cricket. And that sort of, we're having to start that cycle again. What's next? At the end of this month, we are having a £72,000 3-lane artificial state-of-the-art cricket facility put on the outfield. The white on the sort of centre and centre left is the existing batting end and bowling end. This one is going to be enclosed within a cage, and it's a 3-lane facility which much higher full length specification. So that's effectively one of the benefits of the fundraising. We had a really successful crowdfunding appeal that's made that happen. So that's the future as of the end of this month. So I think that's as much as I want to say in terms of the presentation. Hopefully that's given you an idea of how we did it and what we've done. I'll just ask Karen to come in again because she's been there before, there right through, and has actually seen in far more detail the difference in the club during that process. So for Karen, any reflection you've got on the changes you've seen?
Well, I mean, it's the club's almost unrecognisable. I mean, in a sense, the flood gave us the chance to reflect on what we were offering and better ourselves. And, you know, the fundraising and the grants really helped. Obviously, we have an amazing new clubhouse, a great and growing team of volunteers, and a very strong coaching team. I mean, Russell has been integral to ensuring our coaching offering is second to none, and it's really helped us develop skills and expertise. But more so, I mean, the club itself, Russell touched on it before, is a real hub of the community, and we've all been keen to develop this, and that's really worked. And we've got people down to the club, not just for cricket, but also social purposes, which has been fab. And I'm on a constant chant to try and get more women and girls involved, because that's where my kind of real passion lies.
Well, Russell, Karen, a massive thank you from me, and I'm sure echoed by everybody who's joined us and those people who will join us once we've sent out the recording. I think that let's give people the opportunity to ask some questions. I'll ask a couple maybe to start off, because it's brilliant to have a kind of real life case study where the outcomes are so positive. And we know in all walks of life that's not always the case. And in cricket, we have lots of clubs that are struggling financially, struggling to grow their membership, grow their volunteer base, grow their kids offering, etc. So I know you've credited Russell. I know Russell well enough to know that he'll have been absolutely at the centre of it. But in addition to the two of you, who else were the kind of the brains and the almost like the committed team that led this recovery and this fight back?
Well, there's a very strong management committee that has effectively a number of individuals who have a professional background in sports development. The chairman, John Maud, was head of Leisure Tynedale, or chief executive of Leisure Tynedale. Ian Haggie's the business manager. We've got a successful secretary whose professional background was getting grants in his local authority capacity. So that team helped enormously and led with the planning and the development of the infrastructure, the actual pavilion itself. And we were left to basically get on with the coaching side and say, right, how are we going to make this work? And All Stars was an enormous help to us in that capacity, because here was all of a sudden a way of attracting a large number of people from the village, because we're a little bit outside the village and it's quite a walk for some people to get there.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden having 92 children, bringing their mums and dads and seeing, oh, isn't this a lovely place to sit in the sun next to the river whilst our children are looked after in a fun, well-structured environment, helped us initially realize there's a financial benefit to the club of this. It's the right thing to do in any event to grow the volunteer base. And it's not just about some of them will go and coach. We have joiners, we have plumbers, we have planning people, we have solicitors, we have doctors who will do the first aid. There's a whole host of professional skills that these well-meaning parents who are positively inclined towards the club because they see us as volunteers doing the right thing for their children, they want to help us.
Yeah, but I think it's you both will know this, that's not always the case in every club, and as most clubs rely so heavily on volunteers, I think the way that you talked about going over and above, you didn't use that phrase, but that's what it meant to me. You went over and above in terms of the coaching, the education, the involvement, the inclusion, the engagement of those volunteer coaches. That definitely would have contributed to the confidence building, the leadership. I loved what you said, Karen, about be brilliant at the basics. I think just also it would be good insight to know how often not only did you go down, Russell, but Tony Robson and co, because Karen's point about, well, you both mentioned this. Once you've got your qualifications, same with any training, isn't it? Once you've got your qualification in your actual exam or whatever it is, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can apply that learning into a setting with confidence and competence. So how often did you manage to get Tony down? Because resources within the local ECB network are stretched far more than they were even back in 2015.
Tony's now self-employed because he left the ECB. So Tony is the one paid official who basically was brought in. I mean, I came with a coach education background from the board, but I've never been paid for any of this. I did this as a volunteer because I saw the impact upon those original volunteers. It was quite striking the day I turned up to see some people that I knew and I respected in such a low place and facing this existential risk. It had a big impact on me. So it almost became a bit of a pet project, because every time I go to Corbridge, it's a 40-mile round trip.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, I'm there about 1 o'clock in the afternoon because it takes us about 3 hours to put out all the stations for dealing with 90 kids and put out all the flags, then deliver the session, then put them away. But it motivated me, to see the other coaches and how they develop, particularly the younger ones, because some of these have actually gone on and made a career of this, either as players or as coaches and potentially future leaders, teachers, coaches, whatever they want to be.
Yeah.
But to see those individuals grow and see the club evolve. And I think the thing that's motivated me is in previous clubs, you've always had your doubters.
Mm-hmm.
I've never met such a together bunch of people. And yes, you'll occasionally have people having a slight difference of opinion, but actually everybody recognizes we are the custodians of this club. We want to take it from the despair of December 2015 and leave it in a much better place. And the stepping stones in terms of getting people on that basic qualification, improving that qualification, the CPD to make them bigger and better is a continuing process, and it's not finished yet.
Yeah, so it's like a living, breathing legacy, isn't it? But maybe I don't know. I don't want to sound like a doom and gloom, but maybe if the Tyne hadn't flooded, maybe the outcome would be different. You wouldn't have had 92 All-Stars. You wouldn't have rallied together and fought back and come up with a plan. I don't know. It sounds like you've got a very committed management team and an extensive, very committed volunteer team. But I still, everybody knows in club cricket that getting your parents and getting your volunteers to help every year becomes more and more challenging. So I think this is why this case study is such an inspiring one, because despite all the those horrendous scenes that you were all greeted with back at in December 2015 or whenever it was, everybody rallied round and everybody found ways to fight back, and as you said at the beginning, it's a new beginning, it's not the end, and it's still carrying on. The one other question I've got before opening it up, sorry, I'm kind of dominating this a bit, but I would like to give the other guys the opportunity, because the funding element, which is just an amazing story to have grown from £10,000 from the ECB initially to nearly £450,000 presently. Who is that? Somebody who's got a background and competence and experience in fundraising that's kind of led on that, or is that another collective team effort?
Well,
No,
Mike's led on it. I mean, I'll let Karen speak on that one. She knows the history more.
No. All I was going to say, I mean, we've got someone who used to do funding, in his career, and he is he goes everywhere. We are so lucky with him. I mean, he is. I mean, obviously we've been doing fundraising ourselves, but we've got these big grants. I mean, Russell's been very key with the ECB, but this Michael has been like a dog with a bone to get every single scrap, bit of money we can, and without him we wouldn't have got half of it for sure.
But that's what you need.
A lot of the local volunteer forces have circulars, so each week I get a printout. I get an email with all of the deadline dates for different trusts, and they'll be broken down. People who want to work with disability, people who want to work with lower socioeconomic classes, people deprived communities, people who deal with refugees, people who deal with education needs. So it's a matter of understanding what the opportunities and how you frame your bid, but actually make that integral in part of what you're planning. So all of the environmental stuff, a lot of that's paid for by environmental grants. If I go back to the disability element, we've got a disability ramp up the side that we've made out of soil and built it up, which has been recognised as good practice. The stuff I mentioned earlier about iCoach and using that to get children with special educational needs familiarised with what we're doing and having the confidence to get them, and more importantly, their parents on side, and giving them an opportunity to take part in mainstream sport and become helpers to the club, again, ticks a lot of boxes, and people will recognise that if you've got a good case to give you grant aid.
Yeah, but again, it's Michael, you said, Karen, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so not every club's got a Michael, but I think
No.
the emphasis I would strike is, or the point I'd make and underline it a million times, is when you're looking to establish a management team, one of your main priorities should be to find somebody who's got experience in that area, because if it's not your bag, it's very, very hard.
Yeah. And you know, like in work, when in a different capacity at work, you know, when we've been looking for funding, if you don't know it, it's very hard. And my heart goes out to every other club that doesn't have a Michael, because you're on the back foot right from the start.
Yeah. So let's just hear if Jill or your daughter Katie wants to ask any questions.
I'm sure Katie won't. She's getting ready.
Well, it would be interesting to get Katie's perspective as a young person who got involved as an activator and has gone on as a player and a coach herself, and is now in university land with, you know, potential careers ahead of her. What she's felt about that journey, because she's a young person who's gone through this. Hey there, Katie.
Hello, yes, I am.
Do you want to say anything?
I don't know. I think I found it really useful as like a young person going into actually coaching. Like, it makes you more inspired about like staying in cricket, and makes you care more about the game as a whole. So I feel like getting more of those, like especially young girls, bringing them up into like a coaching role, like it just means that the whole sort of like all of cricket for them, like it'll be sort of like it'll become more of an integral part of their life, and then it just kind of trickles down the generations.
Nice.
We did something similar with the equivalent of you, Katie. Reached out to some of her friends to ask them to come down to the club, just to kind of, you know, be together rather than missing out on each other's company, and that started a whole sort of almost like a new team of young helpers, through one person reaching out to friends in their social group and saying, you know, come down to see what it's like and just have some fun. And then that's led to similar things that you guys have done over the year.
Well, I think,
yeah, definitely.
If you think about this purely from a development of excellence point of view, yes, all of those girls have gone on to bigger and better things. And in sort of former club land, when I was at Tynemouth, and if anybody wants to listen to episode 40 of Tom's podcast, I talk about stuff that happened at Tynemouth Cricket Club aligned to the Chance to Shine programme. And there's one case study that I keep coming back to, where I had a 9-year-old whose mother was very ill, and that 9-year-old used to go late to school, go home at lunchtime, make her mum's lunch, go home early from school and make her mum's tea and put her to bed. Hell of a commitment for a 9-year-old. The teacher spotted that youngster engaged with cricket when we went in as a club and delivered Chance to Shine within that school environment. So the school arranged with social services for some respite care for a 9-year-old to effectively allow that youngster to come to the club environment. Now, when they came to the club, they just yacked. They just talked and talked and talked. And I had to tell a couple of the other coaches off who were saying, oh, they're not interested in the activity. And I said, look, that youngster, you have no idea of the commitment that youngster and the responsibility that 9-year-old has. This is the one chance they have to be a child. If they want to come and yak to their mates, brilliant. I don't care whether they go on to be a big cricketer. We are helping with that child's development. And I think we all have a responsibility as leaders in sports clubs to understand people have different motivations, people have different pressures on their external life. If we can make that life a little bit better, we've done our jobs.
Yeah.
That's really rewarding as a volunteer.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
Okay.
Are there any? I don't know whether Jill is Jill, but if Jill's there and wants to ask a question, please go ahead. Or if not, don't worry. We'll kind of wrap it up there to say again a huge thank you to Karen and to Russell, and to say that we will send out the recording on video onto YouTube if Russell and I can work out how to do that. We might need Katie's help. And then our next meeting, or our next chat with Cricket Coach 365 will be held on Monday, April the 15th, with a fellow Northeasterner, David Charlton, who's a sports psychologist. And we're going to listen to his experience of helping junior cricketers deal with the mental side of the game. So for tonight, thank you very much for all of you've done, Russell and Karen, and thank you very much for those of you who've signed into the call this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Cheers, folks.
Thank you.